Hey, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to show you how to make this map showing potential views from the top of Clingman's Dome, an amazing lookout at the peak of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Here's a closer look at what we're going to dig into. Let's rock and roll. So I've actually been to this place a few times. Look at these little rascals. Rascals! All of them. Okay, so here is a shot. Taking a look at those cool sculpted plaster 3D maps at the Visitor Center. I think this is Sugarland's Visitor Center. Now, Clingman's Dome is in here somewhere. I think it's near the top. Like maybe right around here is kind of where I would stick it. So here we are looking at some beautiful imagery in ArcGIS Pro of our subject matter. Here's a big old pickle blob showing the extent of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park that I downloaded from the National Park Service. Thank you very much. And here is the location of Clingman's Dome. Clingman's Dome has a viewing tower built on it, modernist style, circuitous ramp. It's actually quite beautiful. I visited there one time when it was pretty icy and I felt like Iceman from the Super Friends zipping down this thing. It was dangerous, but I did it anyway. If you look at the National Park Service's website about Clingman's Dome, it's kind of an interesting claim there. What? On clear days, views expand over 100 miles? Really? Okay, they're the federal government. We have to trust them. This is what you could expect to see on a typical day. Kind of cloudy, but on a clear day, I guess you can see further than this. So let's take them at their word and do a 100-mile view extent. So here we are back in Pro, and I'm going to do a buffer because I want to see what 100 miles looks like. And when I run the buffer, it looks like this squished egg shape. Now, why is it squished like this? It's because we're using an unprojected WGS 84 coordinate system. And so it's going to be squished. You know, this isn't the true distance. What we need to do is get our map as quickly as possible into an equidistant projection so that distance is maintained and everything else is warped. So we're going to do that. And it looks like, okay, good. Now we've got a circle. This is what it should look like. Cool, equidistant. We have a 100-mile buffer around Clingman's Dome, extending vastly beyond the extents of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. I want to tweak this a little bit because we're kind of rotated because this particular projection is centered over the center of the contiguous United States, and I want to center it directly over Clingman's Dome so it's not rotated as much. So I'm going to copy and modify, and I'm going to change the central meridian to that of Clingman's Dome. And now it looks like this, slightly less rotated, north is up kind of thing. Just to isolate the variables, folks. Now, when you look from the top of Clingman's Dome, you get this kind of neat atmospheric perspective. Things are brighter where you're closer and it tapers off into the distance. Let's try to approximate something kind of like that, but with a sense of light and shadow in Pro. Can we do anything like this? Well, we can darn well try. I'll turn off my outline and I'll choose a gradient fill for this buffer, and it kind of looks like the beginning of Looney Tunes. We can do better than this, so I'm going to expand the pattern and I'll keep it at circular, or set it to circular instead of buffered. I'm going to choose continuous so it's nice and smooth. I'm going to expand this drop list and choose color scheme properties. You weren't stuck with just those two little color chips there of one color to another color. You can open this up and really go to town and make your own custom color scheme, which I highly recommend. So here we are with that default color scheme of white in the middle. I'm going to choose red at the very edge of our 100-mile distance, and then kind of taper into a yellow as you get closer to the observer location, and then kind of like a very faint creamy white yellow at the very center, and then we can start playing with transparencies. I'm going to push all the way back to 100% transparency at the red edge of our view extent. By the way, this kind of looks like candy corn to me, having just gone through the craziness of Halloween at the Nelson family. And then that other one, I'll choose like a 60% transparency. And here we go. This is what it looks like. It's kind of interesting. It looks like kind of a heat lamp. It's covering up. We do use transparency, but it's covering up our base map a little. I want to bake these vibrant tones into the imagery itself. So I'm going to go into the Appearance tab, expand the blend modes, and choose Overlay. Probably my favorite blend mode. I'll choose Overlay, and what happened? Kind of looks like it disappeared. Well, it's because it's such a subtle effect now, and we've kind of lost a little bit, but I still like it. If a little bit is good, maybe twice as much will be better. Yes, it is. I've clicked the control key and dragged my Klingman's Dome 100-mile buffer and released, and I've made a copy that way. You don't have to right-click and choose copy and right-click the map and choose paste. You can just do a control drag to duplicate it. Now that I've duplicated it, I do like what I'm seeing. This is a nice amount of effect. Let's zoom in, take a closer look. Let's get to work on this pickle. I'm gonna expand the symbology for the boundary of this national park. What should I do? I wanna show that it's a park, but I don't wanna obscure too much of the underlying stuff. So I'm gonna choose a hatch to fill. And by default, we have this, but I'm gonna play with the line separation, spread it out just a little bit. I'll make it a lighter kind of yellow color so you can still see it. And then that stroke, I think we can do better than just a solid gray stroke. I'll choose a gradient stroke. I'll give it boost it to like a 4-point thickness so we can actually see what we're doing. Really what I'm trying to do here is simulate a drop shadow. I want a glow effect. I want a drop shadow effect. How do I do this around a polygon? Gradient stroke, that's how. So 4-point gradient stroke. Let's play with these colors. It'll go out to black, from black to black. See, I've got black in both color stops, and then the end color stop I've just made fully transparent. It's 4 points thick, and you see how that like little national parkway that is part of the park boundary there at the top has been crushed into oblivion. There's a singularity. All those travelers are getting smushed like the compactor in Star Wars. How do we give this some more breathing room so that the thick 4-point line renders outside of our polygon instead of centered over our polygon? Our 4-point line is rendering right in the middle, which is its job. It's okay. But let's use the offset effect to push that out half the distance of our line's thickness. So now our shadow is only rendering outside of the polygon, where we want it to be. And I'll choose accurate, and here we go. We've got a shape of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And of course, I'm gonna open up the blend modes and give it a soft light blend mode just to push it back in there and make it feel like it's part of the landscape and not some polygon that's on top of it. It looks like this when we zoom out to our end effect. No, really, when I look at the landscape from the top of Klingman's Dome, I mean, there's obstructions in the way. I'm here to look at some mountains, obviously, but I can't see what's on the other side of these mountains. I get some blind spots created by these hills, and I can't see the other side of them. It's a view shed with blind spots. If only there was some way in a GIS we could replicate, so I'm just kidding. Yes, of course we can do something like this. We're going to use a view shed tool. This was developed, by the way, by my colleague Shuguang Huang in the geoprocessing team. All these tools are made by human beings, people, and it's a great tool, but we're gonna need a gigantic, big, fat, 100-mile extent digital elevation model to feed this robot. Where do we get something like this? This is, honestly, it's one of my favorite websites in the whole wide world. Thank you, Derek Watkins. I love it. You can come here and download NASA's SRTM digital elevation model images. Derek Watkins nailed this experience, so I'm gonna grab, believe it or not, 15 of these. Yes, all 15. It looks like this in ArcGIS Pro. They're all different. I need to stitch them together into one elevation model to rule them all. What do? I'm gonna fire up the Mosaic to New Raster tool. And what this does is it mosaics them into a new raster. It just stitches them into one big giant image like this. Now I have a Smokies GeoTIFF elevation model of my area, which itself is quite beautiful. I love just looking at the ghostly, ethereal qualities of a digital elevation model. I could stare at this all day long. Sometimes I do. It's time to fire up the Geodesic Viewshed. Now there's a ton of parameters here, but these are pretty interesting. Observer offset. That means how tall was the tower you were standing on? I looked it up. It's 14 meters tall. The result looks like this, which looks pretty plausible. It's a good sign when the result looks meaningful. I can see those blind spot shadows cast by nearby hills from my perspective, and I can see the me-facing sides of mountains which are visible to me and the other sides aren't. This makes sense. It's pretty cool looking amoeba, spidery blob of visibility from the top of Klingman's Dome. Now we can get rid of our input elevation model. We're finished with it. You've done your good work. I want to turn this raster image result into a polygon. So I'm going to choose the raster to polygon tool, and boom, looks like this. We zoom in, we can see like the fills and the outlines. Here's a closer look. Now my goal is to make this look like I'm standing at an illumination source, and my eyeballs essentially are the illumination, and whatever is illuminated is what I can see, like a spotlight kind of thing. How can we replicate this with our polygon? Well, I'm gonna, instead of I'm gonna give it like a nice kind of yellowy headlamp fill, and instead of that gray stroke, I'll give it the same colored stroke and make it kind of thicker and very semi-transparent. So it's quite transparent. It's like 80 or 90% transparent. And I'm going to dig into the structure of this symbol, and I'm going to duplicate that outline, and I'm going to make it even thicker so that you start stacking up this set of increasingly thick semi-transparent outlines. And the effect really is a blurring of our polygons. Can you see that? See how it's kind of fading out and blurring? That's fun. Now, when I do a blend mode, overlay of course, we have this kind of neat illumination effect happening, which is really cool, especially in the water and the island and stuff. Check that out. I love that. It's so fun. Blew my mind when I first saw it. That's one of the wonders of GIS. You have an idea and you kind of work towards something, and then all of a sudden one step of the process is revealed to you and it just washes over you. It's a wonderful feeling, so rewarding. Let's zoom out a little bit, look at our full field of view from the top of Klingman's Dome. This is looking kind of cool. I want to provide a little bit more of a nighttime sense, a little bit of a darkening of our areas that we can't see from the top of Klingman's Dome, but I don't want to darken the areas that we can see. I want to have more contrast here. I'm going to add a layer that I've made called Global Background. Now this is, and I'll provide a link to it down in the description, but this is just a big rectangle that covers the whole world. That's it. That's all it is. It looks like this. Can you believe it? Here it is, given like a mid-tone gray, because I'm going to choose the multiply blend mode. Multiply will darken based on the tone of the input. Now if the tone is a mid-gray, it'll just kind of darken everything like 50%. Unfortunately, we've darkened everything. I'm going to drag this underneath my illumination visibility polygon, and it's still too muted. I think I need to take the next step and actually cookie cutter this out with the masking feature. So with the global background selected, I'll come up to the appearance tab and expand that little masking drop list, and I'll say, hey, don't render wherever you see the Klingman's Dome viewshed. Boom. Think of it like masking tape. Craig Williams told me that. I have a darkened area where I can't see, and I'm not darkening where I can see. And this step, out of all the steps, just made this look like I'm looking at an actual little 3D model of the world with an illumination source. And I think it's wonderful. Here's a closer look. Things are happening. An even closer look. Things are still happening. Look at that cool cast shadow on the water. It's fun. Now, I said illumination source, and currently that white circle with a black outline, it's just not cutting it anymore. And that's kind of that's the way that design goes. The further you design something and are happy with the results elsewhere in your work, the more obvious the incomplete design of everything else starts to look. So a rising tide rises all ships, and it's time to rise the ship of Klingman's Dome point feature. So I'll open the symbology panel for this, and instead of that solid thing, let me tell you a secret. So if I expand shape fill symbol here, there's some kind of options. All right, format polygon symbol is a button. Polygon, we're dealing with a point symbol. What gives? Well, let me tell you, Pro treats point symbols as just interestingly shaped polygons. This is like a circular polygon. Oh my goodness, once you realize this, all manner of symbology hacks are available to you. Let's open up this circular shaped polygon and dig in a little bit. I'm going to give this a gradient fill, just like we did with our 100-mile buffer. Gradient fill. I'm going to do the same tricks. You've already seen me do them. Now we have a little light bulb looking point symbol, and I'm going to add a layer for water just to provide a little bit of context, and it looks cool. I have a water layer, so I just dropped it in. I'll do the same thing for states. They're very faint, very subtle. It's just a semi-transparent white stroke with a thicker even more transparent black stroke, because I don't want, it's not terribly important to me. I just want to provide a little bit of context for the map viewer. That's all. It should be commensurate with how important it is, because I just want to provide context. So speaking of context, it might be nice to show what cities are around me in this potentially viewable distance. And so here are some city point locations, and I've given them a smaller version of this illuminated light source. They look like little flashlights in the distance waving back to me. Hey John, you're at the top of Klingman's Dome. I'm over here. Let's go in, take a closer look, and start labeling these things. There's Knoxville and Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge, interesting place, by the way. Crazy physics happening over there. I want these labels to look like they're casting a shadow. Can I do something like this? I'm going to dig in once more to the polygon symbol for this layer. What? Yes. Labels in Pro are still just nothing more than polygons shaped like text. Yeah, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. So I'm going to expand this text fill symbol, choose format polygon symbol, and I'm going to give it a kind of a cool gradient, like it's illuminated from the bottom of white to kind of a golden color, amber at the top. And I'm going to go into the structure and just duplicate this and add a move effect, because we need to nudge it a little bit. And then back in my symbol layers, I'm going to give it a black to transparent black gradient and just move it a little bit to the left and up, like it's a shadow. And if a little bit is good, maybe more is better. Yeah, it's kind of weird and janky looking there in the preview, but when you look at the map, it works. It's a little shadow being cast. Let's zoom out and see what we've got. Now, what about scale? I want to show on this map a sense of distance. I mean, that's kind of the point. Like, how far can you see? Ooh, 100 miles. How far away is this? And I don't want to just put a boring little rote default scale bar. Now, in the past, I've made a map of the Appalachian Trail. It was kind of in the design philosophy of Field Notes, beautiful brand Field Notes. And they have little notebooks, and some of them are lined, but some of them are gridded with dots. And I love a nice dot gridded notebook. To echo that design sense, I did a grid here, but they happen to be spaced every 5 miles. This is effectively a scale bar that lives over the entire surface of this long map via these little dots. And you can see a little nod to that here, 5 miles by 5 miles, or you can do about 7 miles diagonally. The whole thing is draped in a scale bar. And I'm going to do that with a multi-ring buffer. I've done 10 10-mile buffer rings here, and that's it. And I've called it not a scale bar, but it's giving me the context of distance, 10-mile bands. I'm going to make it dashed, very semi-transparent with a semi-transparent black stroke in there too. Looks like a little bit of double stroke offset. Now it's time for a layout. I'm going to create a custom-sized layout. Looks like this. I'm going to insert my map. We've done all this work. Let's drop this into a layout. Boom. A nice, big, thick margin. Neat line. I love it. Just kidding. I don't love it. We're going to take this right to the edge. We don't have time for margins in our layout. We're going to take this map right to the edge. I think it's time to add a little overview context. So I'm going to insert a new map, brand new map, and I'm going to drop in simple shapes. Got these from Natural Earth. I'm going to insert this map into our layout and plop it right there in the corner where an overview belongs. And I'll insert an extent indicator. Boom. This is where the main map view is. Isn't that great? I don't have to try to replicate it manually. You can just do it automatically. But you can also style it. I think we can do a little bit better with this overview. So I'm going to select my overview map, and in its map frame properties, I'm going to get rid of that default 1-point black border, making it invisible. And I'm going to nudge my overview down to the corner, and I'm going to push this back visually, make it quite semi-transparent, 80% transparent. I'm going to change the properties of this extent indicator, which is currently a black rectangle. Open the properties, and again, you can just design this just like you can any other polygon symbol in ArcGIS Pro. So I'm going to dig in here and I'm going to do some crazy magic, which you know already. Now I can actually see it. And I'm going to drop in some text labels. And my goodness, look at me. When I put this together, I labeled North Carolina as Kentucky. I'm sorry, North Carolina. I still love you. Sorry I called you Kentucky. I fixed it in the final map, but not here. And I also dropped in these distance labels. These are just inserted text. Nothing too fancy. I didn't actually physically label the features themselves. I just used text and manually named them and manually positioned them because there's so few that it's good enough and it's faster this way. And I'm going to add a Smoky Mountain National Park label, and I'm going to give this a title, Illuminating Views from Atop Clingman's Dome. And the Clingman's Dome has that vertical gradient, which you saw me do for the cities label too. Now what about this default source graphic? Because we're using Esri's imagery base map, and so there's this, boom, Earth Star Geographics source for our imagery. It's got a black text with a white double stroke outline, and I can't do anything about the size or the font or the position. I'm stuck with it. No, I'm not. Check this out. Heather Smith showed me this, and I'm so thankful to her for this. In the insert menu, dynamic text, scroll almost all the way to the bottom. Hidden almost, you might say. Service layer credits. Click this, and then click anywhere on your map, and you now have a text box which you can control the formatting of. You can give it a reasonable size, reasonable color. You could add content to it if you want to. Always label your sources and give credit where credit is due. Credit. It's fun to give credit. So there we go. A much better looking service credit text box, and we are complete. Well, I thank you so much for following along in this crazy, long, rambling, meandering demonstration of how to make a line of sight viewshed illumination map from the top of Clingman's Dome. Give it a shot. Make maps of all over the place. I want to see your viewshed maps. Make them glow. Have some fun. Have a great day. Bye.